As an 18-year-old transvestite, I still find myself with that typical teenage obsession of wanting to see naked girls all the time. Yet in reality, all I have are glimpses in a few magazines. When I peer into my reflection now, I notice a young girl gazing back. Mom styled my hair so it sweeps past my ears, held by two barrettes, with bangs softly brushing my eyebrows. Small gold earrings dangle just above a bright red smile. I wear a simple white pullover that stretches gently over my new breasts, showing a hint of curve at my waist before it meets a flirty skirt that ends mid-thigh. My heels lift my backside and shape my nylon-covered legs, making them appear sleek, long, and undeniably feminine. Somehow, I have become that girl. As graduation approached, talk about college naturally surfaced. I wanted to head to state, and my parents agreed. I had the grades, a scholarship, and the motivation to go. Then I stumbled into trouble with the local police. It was my first run-in with them, so the judge released me to my parents' care. It all started when a buddy of mine and two of his pals convinced me to sneak a peek at the girls' dorm on a nearby campus. Our little mischief was cut short by a stern woman who resembled my dad in a dress. We dismissed the incident as a harmless prank. The moment my parents and I got home, though, I knew there would be consequences. Dad was livid, Mom fuming, and their combined fury made me wish I had run away on the spot. He motioned me toward the couch, and I braced for the worst punishment of my life. What actually happened was more shocking than anything I could have predicted. My name is Jesse, I am 18, and until recently, I considered myself an average guy. Brown hair and eyes, standing at about 5'6", and fairly skinny. It was Mom who delivered the verdict. I would not be grounded. In fact, I could leave the house whenever I pleased. Foolish relief washed over me, right up until she explained that, since I was so eager to see what a girl looked like in her underwear, I would get the chance to find out firsthand. She declared that tomorrow, she would ensure I had that opportunity and that I was not allowed to step outside. She then asked if I liked the new image of myself. Still shaken by my own reflection, I couldn't form the words, but somewhere in the back of my mind, a silent yes was ready to escape. The next morning around 11, I was still half asleep when Mom swept into my room and, without preamble, told me to strip down to my briefs. Being a transvestite, I've worn women's clothes by choice before, but never quite under these circumstances, so I hesitated. Still, I obeyed. She then massaged some kind of lotion or cream into my skin, not bothering to reveal its purpose. The stuff made me itch like crazy, yet I had to wait there, enduring the discomfort, until she finally allowed me to shower. As I was heading to the bathroom, she insisted I shave as close as possible. Clueless as to her endgame, I followed orders. But when I watched the last traces of hair swirl down the drain, I had a pretty strong hunch I wouldn't be happy about the outcome. I emerged with a towel around my waist to find an entire outfit laid out on the bed. At that instant, I realized her plan, though I couldn't exactly run off wearing nothing but a towel. Mom then reminded me about the freedom she and Dad had granted me free to leave whenever I liked, so long as I wore these clothes, or similar attire, until they decided otherwise. Apparently, that was the real reason she had me strip of all body hair. Next, she handed me a pair of panties, which I held awkwardly between my fingertips until she asked if I needed help. I squirmed into them, and so began my transformation. Mom guided me to her vanity, painting my face with foundation and powder, followed by eyeshadow and eyeliner, then blusher and eyebrow pencil. She cinched my waist with a nipper, fitted me with a bra, slid a padded panty brief up my legs, and finished with pantyhose. A red thigh-skimming skirt and a white sleeveless pullover came next, both of which left me feeling more exposed than I'd anticipated, even as a transvestite. A pair of black heels rounded out the ensemble, but my hair, shaved on the sides and cropped short up top, looked downright absurd in contrast. Mom set me back down at the vanity, firmly affixing a short auburn wig to my head. Afterward, she handed me a tube of red lipstick. Though I loathed doing it under her watchful eye, I carefully traced it across my lips. Earrings were clipped on, a short necklace draped around my neck, and a light spritz of perfume settled on my skin. When she was finished, she announced I was free to do as I pleased. I was left to stare at my reflection, trying to convince myself this was all a bad dream. Part of me wanted to hole up in my room forever, but I knew both of my parents expected to see me dressed just like this. I tried consoling myself with the thought that staying hidden inside the house wouldn't be so bad, at least no one else would have to witness me like this. But the moment I ventured into the family room, I discovered how wrong I was. Dad was out, and Mom was waiting with her purse in one hand. In the other, she held yet another purse, which she promptly held out for me to take. I clutched the purse Mom handed me, realizing she had tucked my wallet, a lipstick tube, and tissues inside it. She announced we needed to run errands at the grocery store first, because Dad planned to take us out for dinner later. My head practically spun. Venturing outdoors, looking like this, and then going out to eat at a restaurant afterward felt like a nightmare come true. Yet I found myself rooted in place until she hooked my arm and guided me outside to the car. My heart pounded the moment I stepped beyond the threshold of our home. My nylon-covered legs were nearly on full display in the short skirt, and I was certain that at any second, someone would see me for who I really was. Mom, however, reassured me that I looked perfectly fine and told me to relax, a tall order when I had to do the actual walking. Once she parked and got out, I hesitated but eventually followed, trailing her into the store. I pushed the cart while we zigzagged through aisles brimming with people. Most of them were women, but I recognized a few classmates' girls, naturally accompanied by their mothers. Several times I felt panic tightening my throat, yet there was no escape. I pressed onward, hoping that none of them would look twice or question who I was. By the time we returned to the car, my nerves were shredded, but Mom calmly said I had handled it well and that I could change outfits after putting the groceries away. In my frustration, I tried protesting that the whole dorm prank was harmless anyway, pointing out that my friends and I never actually managed to see any girls. She countered that my willingness to sneak around was bad enough on its own. The others involved had been charged with multiple offenses because they had prior records, but this was my first mistake. The judge released me on condition that my parents teach me a lesson. Since my goal had been to sneak peeks at girls in their lingerie, Mom explained that this new arrangement was the perfect consequence. I pressed her for a time frame, but she finally revealed that it would continue for 6 months. The judge had sentenced my friends to a year, so a half year of living as a girl was deemed an appropriate reminder not to behave that way again. I panicked, aware that I would need to start school soon or risk jeopardizing my scholarships. Mom simply said that nothing would truly change except for my appearance and wardrobe. She mentioned that Jessie could easily become Jessie Alice, and that I would stay here at home for college, so she and Dad could make sure I followed through. My heart sank. Surviving half a year in this role seemed impossible. If I tried to switch back to being a boy afterward, everyone would know what had happened, and I would be a laughingstock. 6 months might as well be an entire year in terms of the damage it could do. Sobbing, I sank onto the couch, and Mom sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders in what I guess was meant to be a comforting gesture. She insisted it would not be that bad. Apparently, as far as she was concerned, I made a convincing girl already, and if I could master little things like walking in heels, it would all go smoothly. She also reminded me that plenty of people wear skirts and dresses daily with no trouble. In a few days, I might even settle into a routine, and by the end of the month, I should be capable of doing my own makeup and styling my wig. Once college began, I would blend into the crowd like anyone else. None of that stopped me from feeling terrified, but there was no denying that my life had officially changed. That evening felt like it would never end, yet Mom breezed through it as if it were no big deal. After we stored the groceries, she took me up to her room, pulled out a dress from her closet, and handed it over along with a few new-looking items. A heavy sigh escaped me as I carried them to my bedroom and laid them out on the bed. I glanced into the mirror once more, hoping for any kind of loophole or change in appearance, something that would make this crazy plan impossible. No luck. The reflection staring back at me was undeniably feminine. Tears welled in my eyes as I realized how real this was. My friends might be locked up for a bit and wind up with criminal records, but all I had to do was dress like a girl. I honestly couldn't decide which was worse. Mom said I had a few hours before I needed to change for dinner. I wandered into the family room, turned on the TV, and tried to distract myself from the sheer unfairness of my situation. Eventually, it was time to get ready, and I offered no resistance as Mom helped me remove the outfit I had on, then waited patiently while I scrubbed off any trace of makeup. Standing there in nothing but panties, she wrapped a shiny pink garment with white lace trim around my torso, some kind of corset with a built-in bra. I fastened the hooks down the front and immediately felt it cinch my waist. "It's not that tight," Mom assured me, just as she tugged the laces even harder. Once everything was secure, she reached into the bra cups, adjusted my skin upward to create the illusion of breasts, then tapped a thin sock on each side for extra padding. By the time she finished, I looked like I had my very own chest. We headed over to her bedroom vanity next, where she made me do my own makeup this time, coaching me with every brushstroke. It took longer than it had earlier, but the end result was just as transformative. No hint of my boyish face remained. Back in my room, she watched while I pulled on a pair of pantyhose, then offered me a short slip. She helped me guide a red dress over my head and zipped it up. It hugged my newly narrow waist, flaring out at the hips, and the sweetheart neckline dipped low enough to showcase my brand new cleavage. Petticoats underneath rustled with every move, and the hemline fell about 2 inches above my knees short, but not the shortest thing I'd worn that day. Red heels completed the ensemble. Mom handed me a set of gold chandelier earrings with matching red stones, plus a coordinating necklace. I fastened them on, and she ushered me back into her bedroom. "Every girl likes having nice nails," she said, and produced a package of fake nails that she proceeded to glue on one by one. She filed them into a soft, rounded shape, then brushed them with bright red polish 2 layers, plus a clear topcoat. I sat there, hands splayed, letting them dry while she picked out her own clothes for the evening, eventually settling on a sleek black sheath dress. Once my nails were set, she slipped a sparkly cocktail ring onto my finger, gave me a fresh spritz of perfume, and handed me a tube of red lipstick. I carefully reapplied it, feeling like a giant red beacon, hair, lips, dress, and shoes all screaming for attention. My reflection bore absolutely no resemblance to a boy at that point. Mom left to change, and I lingered in my room, facing the mirror for what felt like forever. The whole time, one strange, unexpected thought kept nudging its way to the surface. Maybe, just maybe, I actually liked how I looked. I wasn't supermodel gorgeous, but I'd become cute enough to pass convincingly. It felt surreal to know I could pull off this feminine persona if I really needed to. And I did need to, because the alternative, storming out, dropping school, working a dead-end job, sounded infinitely worse. My parents had designed a punishment that trapped me neatly: either follow their rules or lose everything. So there I stood, dolled up from head to toe, preparing to face the evening as a girl named Jessie, feeling like I had no choice but to accept my new reality. I rested my hand lightly against my chest, feeling the soft swell that now seemed so real and yet remained an illusion. Who on earth would guess it was all smoke and mirrors? Mom entered the room, looking radiant in her black dress, and handed me a small red clutch. I slipped in my wallet and lipstick, then followed her into the family room to wait for Dad's arrival. He had never seen me dressed as a girl, and my stomach flipped at the thought of what his reaction might be. Soon enough, I heard him come in, spotted his outline in the doorway, and then he stepped inside. Mom pulled me up from the couch, so we were both standing, one of us riddled with shame, the other appearing almost astonished. He said nothing, disappearing into his room to change for dinner. Half an hour later, he emerged and silently opened the front door, ushering both Mom and me outside. I assumed we were heading to a simple restaurant, but no, we were on our way to the country club. A place where everyone recognized us, where my friends often spent their weekends. My heart hammered as we drove past familiar faces. Once Dad parked and stood by the car, I opened my door and managed to climb out on shaky heels. I might have run if it weren't for those treacherous shoes. Instead, Dad took one of my arms, Mum the other, and together we crossed the massive lobby and entered the dining room, my bright red dress practically glowing for all to see. We found our seats and Dad, for the very first time, ordered a cocktail for me. He quietly mentioned that I probably needed a drink, considering the situation, and I could tell he needed one too. While we waited for them to arrive, he said I looked nicer than he had expected. I thanked him in the most uncertain way, uncertain because I didn't know how else to respond. He went on to remind me that I had made a careless, foolish choice. Those other boys, the friends I'd gone with, were in serious trouble because of their records. One had been on probation, the other had a laundry list of offenses, so they were now facing 3 years for breaking and entering. The prosecutor had warned Dad that I was also on probation, but loosely, with an agreement to wipe my record clean if I graduated from college. Dad said he'd explained our family's chosen punishment to the prosecutor, who found it harsh but oddly fitting. Just then, our drinks arrived. I seized the moment to tell Dad what I had told Mom earlier, that dressing like a girl for 6 months could easily stretch beyond that, unless I wanted to become a huge laughingstock when I eventually switched back. Dad shrugged, pointing out that, given how convincing I already looked, no one would suspect a thing if I ended up needing a year to keep appearances up. It was a far cry better than prison, he said. I tried to argue, but he wouldn't hear it. He insisted that I would dress as a girl for 6 months, period. My behavior, however, was up to me. If I chose to remain a boy beneath the skirt, that was my decision, and if I preferred acting like a girl to make my life easier, that was also acceptable. I could do it for a year if I wanted, or just the assigned 6 months, but I needed to maintain the image of a girl my own age during that time. He asked if I understood, and I could only manage a quiet yes. Inside, I realized there was no way I would let myself become a joke. I had to rebuild my self-esteem somehow, and the best way was to genuinely embrace the girl I had turned into. If I spent half a year as an awkward boy trying to wear dresses, I would destroy my own social life and future prospects. No, my only real choice was to commit to the role. Once I accepted that, the weight on my shoulders felt somewhat lighter. Dad concluded by instructing Mom and me to go shopping the next day, ensuring I had all the clothes I needed. Over time, he said, I would accumulate more. I had no further questions, so I simply said no, sir. And in that moment, I knew my life had officially taken a turn unlike anything I'd ever imagined. That night, the 3 of us ordered dinner and listened to the band. Dad even got me a second drink, which I sipped nervously, especially when a few of his acquaintances stopped by our table. They all met me as Jessie, of course, and none of them seemed suspicious in the slightest. Part of me was relieved, but part of me felt uneasy. Then Mom and Dad got up to dance, leaving me at the table alone. That's when a stranger appeared and asked me to dance. I wanted to refuse, but somehow he ended up taking my hand, and before I knew it, we were gliding across the dance floor. I don't even remember his name, just the feeling of his hand at my waist and my own hand in his. In that moment, I realized I could truly pull this off if I chose to. Later, Dad asked me for a dance, which felt downright surreal. Around 10, we headed home. Mom helped me out of the dress, unlaced the corset, thank goodness, and I slipped into bed, deciding to embrace my newfound femininity and see where it took me. When morning came, I shuffled into the kitchen wearing my robe, grabbed a cup of coffee, then went back to my room and powered up my computer. A quick search turned up more websites than I could count resources for boys learning to live as girls. After narrowing it down, I spent an hour or so on a site that sold nearly everything a new girl might need, complete with money-saving tips. Intrigued, I printed out the most useful info, crammed it into a desk drawer, and that's when Mom stepped in to announce our shopping trip. This time, I dressed more casually. A navy blue skirt, white blouse, pantyhose, flats, plus the same wig and a bit of makeup. Without complaint, I followed her into the car and off to the mall. Our first stop was a large department store, specifically the lingerie section. Mom looked prepared. She pulled a slip of paper from her purse and began selecting bras, panties, slips, and a camisole. I spotted some padded panty briefs and added 2 to the growing stack. Soon nightgowns joined the mix, 2 flannel, 1 cotton, and 1 nylon. At the register, Mom noticed some breast forms and seemed ready to ask about them, but I stopped her. She paid, and we left. "Those looked nice, Jessie," she commented. "I thought they'd make things easier for you. Why'd you say no?" "Because I can get better ones cheaper," I replied. "I'll show you later." Onward we went to a dress shop, when Mom started choosing items more suited to her own taste. So I had to step in before she made me look like a retiree. A sales associate joined us, and together we selected a handful of skirts, some cute dresses, a few more formal options, and 2 suits. We topped that off with blouses and casual tops. The bill added up fast, but Mom didn't bat an eye. Once again, we hauled our purchases to the car and returned for more. "You seem really eager to go through with this," Mom remarked on the way. "Don't get the wrong idea," I answered. "You and Dad made it pretty clear I don't have a choice, and I'm not about to be known as some weird boy in a dress. That only leaves one real option. I need to look and act the part as convincingly as possible. And no, it's not because of that guy I danced with. I'm not into guys." Mom nodded. "I just thought you looked happy last night. But since you're determined to make the best of this, why not visit that makeup shop over there? We can get you your own supplies instead of using mine." "Fine by me, Mother," I replied, feeling both anxious and determined. We stepped into the cosmetics shop, and I instantly felt a little regret about how quickly I'd agreed to Mom's suggestion. The entire back wall was lined with chairs where women sat as makeup artists worked on them. That part didn't bother me so much, it was the sight of them plucking eyebrows that sent a nervous flutter through my stomach. A sales associate approached Mom, who gestured toward me, and before I knew it, I was in the chair myself. The young woman wiped away every trace of makeup I'd applied that morning. If she noticed my faint stubble, she kept it to herself. She spent some time testing different foundations, 4 tries, to be exact, before she found one that perfectly matched my skin. Then, leaning the seat back, she started plucking away at all the stray hairs. They seemed to rain down onto the plastic cape draped over me, and she kept making these tusk sounds as she worked. The entire process took close to an hour, but when I finally saw my face in the mirror, it was like someone had flipped a switch. Compared to this elegant transformation, I must have looked like a circus clown when I walked in. Mom was thrilled, and I had to admit I liked it too. The way this new makeup brought out my features made it look like I wasn't wearing any makeup at all. By the time we left, I had a bag brimming with everything the artist had used on me. Our next stop was to get my ears pierced, and then we headed home. Once there, I loved my new purchases to my bedroom, hanging everything up or folding it away. Then I slipped into Mom's room, borrowed an old pair of pantyhose, and took them back to my space. I'd already decided to make my own breast forms using birdseed from the garage, so I grabbed the household scale from the den. Back in my room, I experimented until I got just the right weight and shape, tying a small knot on each one so it would resemble a nipple when turned outward. I weighed them to be sure they were the same size, then started getting dressed again. Glancing around, I saw all those new feminine clothes, some stuffed into my closet, others piled on the bed, and realized there wasn't much point in leaving my old male clothes out anymore. I wouldn't be wearing them for a while, so why let them take up precious space? One by one, I pulled them from the closet, carting them down to the basement. Mom must have noticed, but she said nothing. Over an hour later, the only boyish items I kept were a few t-shirts, shorts, and my sneakers. My new makeup supplies were spread neatly across my dresser, the only place I had left to store them since my bathroom lacked a vanity. Mom popped her head in, saw what I'd done, peered into the near-empty closet and at the makeup on the dresser, then mentioned that I really needed a vanity of my own. She said she would talk to Dad about it that evening. Soon afterward, I joined her on the patio for a cold drink. I realized that without even thinking about it, I was using my hands the way she did my freshly manicured nails, catching flashes of light in the corner of my vision. With the slightly longer nails, my fingers looked more slender and feminine. Mom watched me curiously as I crossed my legs, my palm resting up in my lap. She remarked how natural the new makeup looked, and I told her that since she'd given me no real choice, I was just relieved it turned out well. I had no desire to become a public joke, so if I had to do this, I was determined to do it right. Mom reminded me that many people wear dresses, skirts, makeup, or even wigs daily, and eventually find a spark of enjoyment in it. I didn't see myself going that far, but I understood what she was saying. She simply ended with a "we'll see," and that was that. 3 days later, Mom took me to enroll at the college. All my records said Jessie A by default, which could just as easily stand for Alice as it could Adrian. The clerk at the counter saw a girl in front of her, typed my name in, and marked me as female on the forms. Mom and I didn't give it a second thought as we completed more paperwork, and I received my class list. Since I'd be commuting from home, they also gave me a parking pass and then snapped a picture for my student ID. It turned out great, and Mom made sure to comment on that. On the way back to the car, she casually suggested that I should get a driver's license matching my new appearance, especially since I'd be driving myself to campus. We stopped by the licensing bureau, and using my new college ID, I walked out with a fresh license listing me as female. It didn't set off any alarms until we were nearly home. That was when I realized I was officially registered as female at the college. I asked Mom how I'd reverse that down the road if I ever went back to being myself. She didn't have a solid answer, only reminded me it was still a long way off and not to worry. Then I brought up the fact that I now had 2 valid licenses, identical except for the sex and photos. Mom shrugged, saying I wouldn't need the old one for a while, and if the time came for me to switch back, we'd figure something out. 2 days later, I started my classes, and practically the moment I arrived, I spotted a former high school buddy. I dodged him, only to run into another ex-classmate, Eva. She threw me a few curious glances as we took our seats. When the professor did roll call, each of us raised a hand in turn, and Eva's attention snapped back to me when my name came up. That was when I felt certain my cover had already been blown on my first day. I tried to hurry off after class, but Eva caught up to me in the hallway. She said she knew a guy named Jesse in high school, and when she heard the name called, she expected him to answer. Then she gave me a once-over and pointed out that I was clearly not a guy. My heart pounded. It was exactly the kind of confrontation I'd been dreading from the start of this crazy adventure. She actually believed me. My heart was racing from both excitement and dread. Eva accepted me as just another girl and immediately started chatting with me like we'd always been friends. It was the first time I'd interacted with someone my own age who didn't suspect a thing, so I tried my best not to slip up. We discovered we had 4 classes together, and I realized carrying a purse had its perks, since I could stuff all my books and notes in there without a problem. Every day we'd head from one lecture to the next, and it felt so natural that I never suspected anything else would come of it. But then Eva invited me to a get-together at her place, claiming she wanted me to meet her brother that weekend. I was caught off guard and told her no. The last thing I wanted was to stir up any complicated situation, especially if her brother recognized me. But Eva wouldn't take no for an answer. "He's super nice, Jessie, and shy just like you," she insisted. "I'm positive the 2 of you will get along. Come over this Saturday at 7, okay? See you then." She left before I could argue further, leaving me wondering how on earth I'd survive this ordeal. Harry, her brother, was someone I already knew from high school, and if he took a closer look, he might see right through the makeup and tape. Then there was the whole question of what to wear, which, embarrassingly, became my biggest source of anxiety on the drive home. Mom offered some advice when I told her about Eva's party: a modest skirt, blouse, sweater, and low heels. She also mentioned I could avoid going, but I might end up bored to tears if I stayed home every single weekend. After all, college is when you're supposed to build lasting friendships. "All girls your age go on dates, sweetheart," she said. "If the boys start asking you out, do you really plan on hiding at home while everyone else has fun?" "Mom, did you forget? I'm not really a girl, I'm just dressed like one." "But didn't you say you refuse to be seen as a boy in a dress? That leaves you only one option. Fully embrace this role and enjoy yourself. Eva clearly didn't recognize you, and I'm sure Harry will be a gentleman." She'd use my own words against me. Deep down, I agree that isolating myself would be miserable. Retreating to my room, I decided a thorough check was in order. My body was still fairly hairless from the last round of hair removal, but stubble dotted a few spots, so I asked Mom to apply the cream again. 1 itchy hour later, I was silky smooth. Then I dashed out to the drugstore to pick up supplies for a rather personal task I discovered online. Back in my room, I consulted my printed tick sheet, using it step by step to tuck and tape everything securely, creating a smooth, feminine outline. It felt odd at first, but it looked convincingly real, if a bit snug. A few layers of superglue later, I double-checked, and there was no trace of my old shape. For my chest, I used tape to push the small bit of flesh I had into a semblance of cleavage, then added the birdseed forms in my bra for extra fullness. Just as I was studying the result in the mirror, Mom walked in. Her gaze dropped straight to the false vagina I had created, and I flushed. "That's impressive," she said, "but maybe we should get you proper breast forms, Jessie. That way you won't have to tape yourself so tightly, and it'll look even more natural." I couldn't deny the tape was uncomfortable, so I agreed. Mom and I drove to a small specialty shop lined with shelves and counters brimming with all sorts of prosthetic breasts. A kindly saleswoman approached, took one look at me, and asked if I needed undetectable breast forms. I nodded. Moments later, I was in a back room with my blouse off, B-cup bra removed, while the woman examined the tape on my skin. She apologized just before ripping it away, causing me to yelp as she cheerily explained that at least the pain would be short-lived. Then she measured my chest, took a color sample of my skin, and disappeared. When she returned, she held a pair of lifelike silicone forms that matched my tone perfectly. After cleaning my skin, she used an adhesive to fix them in place, smoothing the feather-light edges until they practically vanished against my body. "Once they warm up, you'll feel a slight sensation when someone touches you," she explained. Slipping my bra back on, I could tell they had more weight and bounce than my birdseed forms. Mom settled the bill, and the woman advised me to come back monthly for a proper cleaning and refit. Dad had no idea what we'd been up to. That night, feeling a rush of boldness, I chose my pale blue nightgown without panties and walked into the family room. The silky fabric clung to my new curves and hinted at the flat V shape below. Dad's eyes nearly popped out of his head, and he looked too stunned to speak. I calmly put on my robe and sat down to watch TV, realizing just how completely my image had changed and how accustomed I was becoming to it. The next day, I chose to wear my short black swing dress, the one with a round neckline and short sleeves, along with the matching black lingerie and waist nipper Mom and I had picked out. Around 5, I hopped in the shower, shaved as close as I could, and did my makeup without piling it on. Then I slipped into the panties and bra, fastened the waist nipper, and rolled up the pantyhose. The dress slid over my head easily, clinging to my curves once I zipped it up. Its hem fell a good 3 inches above my knees. I topped it off with black and gold earrings, a gold necklace, a ring, perfume, and bold red lipstick. I brushed out my wig in Mom's room and polished my nails again, finishing up by 6:30. Purse in hand, I headed out the door. Eva greeted me at her front steps, giving me a quick once-over before smiling. "Harry's going to be so into you, Jessie," she teased, leading me into the house and out onto a patio where she'd set up a small buffet. Harry was already there, along with a bunch of classmates and a few people I didn't recognize. Eva introduced me around, and only Keith looked at me in that curious, disconcerting way I'd worried about. Our eyes met for a moment, then he offered me a polite smile and shook my hand. Harry, a tall, quiet guy with dark hair and a solid build, came last. He was just as shy as I remembered. We headed off to get soft drinks, and I spotted Keith chatting with Eva. My imagination filled in the blanks of their conversation, but I tried not to stress over it. As the evening unfolded, somebody switched on the music, and Harry asked me to dance. I let him take my hand, and we swayed gently to the rhythm. He whispered my name, so I glanced up, and in a flash, his lips were on mine. That was definitely more forward than I'd expected from him. I let it happen, unable to find the words to say anything, and when the song ended, Eva swooped in and tugged me aside. "Girl," she said, "you've caught Keith's eye. He wants to ask you out." Trying to sound clueless, I asked, "Isn't he still with Christine over there?" "He claims it's over. Says he wants your number." I sighed. "Tell him I'm here with Harry, so no thanks." "Does Harry know that?" she teased. I shot her a look that said obviously not, but Keith didn't have to know. She relayed my message, and Keith gave me a quick wave. I went back to Harry, who took my hand again. "Sorry if I was too forward," he said quietly, "but you're so beautiful I couldn't help myself." It was the first time anyone had ever called me beautiful, and strangely, I liked hearing it. He pulled me across the lawn where it was a bit darker, then held me close, pressing his mouth against mine with more urgency. My head spun as his tongue brushed against my lips, and I responded instinctively, arms circling his neck. Then his hand shifted lower, giving my backside a squeeze. That jolted me back to reality, and I slipped free, wagging a finger at him even though I couldn't hide a smile. Eva watched from afar, and I felt my cheeks grow hot. When I finally left, Eva asked if she could come by the next day, and I agreed. Later that night, curled up in bed, I wondered what had come over me. I'd never considered myself gay, but in that moment, Harry's rugged handsomeness had made me tingle all over. I touched the smooth spot at my waist, remembering how I appeared completely female. I drifted off with a grin on my face. The next morning, Dad was home for the first time in 4 days, sitting at the table when I walked into the kitchen. I had on just a t-shirt and shorts, no bra, and my new chest clearly had his attention. "Eva's coming over at noon," I said breezily. "Think you'll be properly dressed by then?" he muttered. "I'm dressed, Dad." He arched an eyebrow. "You know what I mean, cover those things up. I'm just letting them breathe, Daddy. I'll change before she gets here." That last part made his eyes narrow, but he held his tongue. After breakfast, I went to my room and switched outfits, pulling on a pair of Mom's shorts that hugged my hips and a low-cut pink top. The snug shorts showed off the slight wedge shape between my legs, and I finished with sneakers. I fastened my wig, clipping the sides back with barrettes, and did a minimal makeup job. Then I headed off to help Mom tidy up, waiting for Eva to arrive and bracing myself for whatever might come next. I could tell Mom was upset with me. She asked why I insisted on flaunting myself around Dad, knowing full well how he felt about women dressing to draw attention. My only response was that I wanted him to see that I genuinely enjoyed having this new figure, that I liked presenting myself as a girl, and I'd begged her not to tell him, since I worried he might force me to stop. She studied me for a second, then nodded with a small smile, as if she had guessed this all along. I reminded her that I liked the snug shorts, despite how tight they were, and she just laughed, saying we might need to find a few in my actual size. Dad came in to refill his coffee then, caught sight of my outfit, and shook his head. I decided it was time we had a talk. I asked him to sit, and once we were both at the table, I explained that since he and Mom demanded I dress as a girl for at least 6 months, I was determined to do it properly. My efforts meant learning to hide certain things and enhance others, uncomfortable as that might be, and that he had no right to judge me by female standards I was never taught. Growing up as a boy, I simply didn't have the same guidance a typical girl might have. He conceded, almost reluctantly, that my transformation was surprisingly convincing, especially the way I managed to create realistic-looking breasts and camouflage my groin. I told him to quit giving me grief over it, then left him and Mom to talk. A short while later, the doorbell rang. Expecting Eva, I opened it to see Harry instead, grinning from ear to ear. Without hesitation, he pulled me to him, spun me around, and planted a firm kiss on my lips. Turning my head, I saw my parents standing behind us, Dad looking stunned, Mom gazing on with a faintly amused expression. Harry introduced himself to Dad, asked if he could take me for a drive, and Dad, though still visibly rattled, nodded in agreement. I grabbed my purse, and off we went. We cruised under a sunny fall sky, eventually heading up to a lakeside park and then a scenic overlook. The view was breathtaking. Harry drew me close and kissed me again, this time more deeply, with his hands resting on my waist. A flutter of conflicting emotions lit up inside me. Part of me felt undeniably drawn to him. Another part remembered that I was still, underneath all of this, physically male, and I wasn't ready or willing to cross certain lines. Even so, the more he leaned in, the easier it became to forget that side of myself, allowing the femininity I felt in the moment to take center stage. Desire battled reality, and I grew increasingly flustered. When Harry finally brought me home, my father was waiting for me in the entryway. He demanded to know what in the world was happening. Why was I letting Harry kiss me if we were both actually male? I reminded him that this entire situation was his idea. He was the one who decided I should present as a girl for a year. I saw no reason to lock myself indoors out of embarrassment or shame, not when I looked convincing enough to function like any other college girl. If a guy found me appealing and asked me out, it wasn't exactly my fault. Furious, I told him that I had no plans to hide in a corner until my time was up. Then I stormed off to my room without giving him a chance to respond. Sitting on my bed, staring at my own reflection, I tried to piece together how I truly felt. The kiss, the closeness, Harry's obvious attraction to me, all of it stirred something I couldn't dismiss. Part of me panicked at the idea that maybe I liked him more than I was comfortable admitting. My hand drifted to my chest breasts that felt real enough and then lower, where nothing but smoothness remained. Logically, I knew it was all an elaborate disguise, yet I couldn't help feeling that it fit me in ways I never expected. It took me almost an hour of moping before Mom came in and sat beside me on the bed. She gently pointed out that my father never imagined I'd adapt so effortlessly. He had expected me to flounder around, looking silly in dresses. But from the moment he saw me, he admitted that I looked surprisingly attractive, which apparently rattled him more than he ever let on. I answered her in frustration, asking how he could fail to realize that if he put me in a position to live as a girl, I'd meet people who'd treat me as one like Harry. And as much as I never intended to be attracted to guys, I couldn't deny I liked the attention. The clothes, the makeup, the wig, the fragrance, even the way Harry kissed me. I liked it all. I confessed I wasn't sure if that meant I was gay, or if I'd been curious all along. All I knew was that the feminine role felt natural to me, and part of me worried I wouldn't be able to give it up once my punishment was over. Mom sat quietly for a moment, letting me spill my thoughts. I finished by saying I intended to keep living as a girl, no matter how Dad reacted, because at this point, my entire social world believed I was female. To them, I was Jessie, and I wanted to preserve that, even if it clashed with the identity I'd grown up with. If it had taken only a couple of months for me to feel this comfortable, what would happen in a year? In the silence that followed, I realized just how serious I was about embracing this life, serious enough that I might not want to go back to who I used to be at all. Mom caught up with me in my room, quietly mentioning that she and Dad had talked while I was upstairs. She confessed to telling him about all the changes, the breast forms, the way I conceal myself, and how the so-called punishment had become something I genuinely enjoyed. She even told him I could have stopped at any point, but chose not to. According to her, he hated the idea, but also realized she was right that I was transitioning into a daughter rather than remaining a son. Mom said it was now her responsibility to teach me everything a young woman needs to know, and that I should go speak with him. Since Dad and I have so much in common, it was important, she said, for him to understand none of this was really his fault. I freshened my lipstick, dabbed on a hint of perfume, and went to find him in the family room. I stood by the door for a moment, hesitant, until he looked up. That was all it took for me to rush over, climb into his lap, and wrap my arms around him. We didn't speak a word, but the understanding between us was clear. I would remain a girl from here on out. Finally, he eased me back a little and reminded me how he felt about women showing off their bodies. He wanted me to be mindful in the future. I kissed his cheek, hugged him again, said I loved him, and went to my room to change. In the months that followed, Harry and I dated a few times before it all fizzled naturally. My hair grew out a lot, so Mom booked us both salon appointments that Friday evening. They colored and cut my hair into a short page boy that framed my face nicely, with soft curls in back and waves at the sides. A stylist also gave me acrylic nails. Over time, Dad and I settled into a more relaxed relationship, although he became protective, always wanting to meet any boy who asked me out. Meanwhile, Mom and I discussed another matter privately, leading me to visit our family doctor. After an exam, I received a prescription. We decided not to mention that part to Dad. 2 days later, as I was rounding a corner on campus, I collided with Lewis. Our books went flying, and I ended up on the ground. He immediately offered me his hand and helped me up. The electricity in the air was unmistakable. My entire body felt a tingling sensation while I smiled back at him. We introduced ourselves, apologized for the crash, and he invited me to get coffee. I learned he was imprimed, tall, dark-haired, and had eyes black as midnight. We exchanged enough details to realize we had a lot in common, and he asked me to have dinner with him on Saturday. I wrote down my number and address, then dashed off to class. For a month, Luis and I went out regularly. One night, after a movie and dinner, he pulled the car onto a quieter lane on campus. We began kissing, and soon his hand was caressing my stomach, moving to my chest, then lower. We fumbled a bit in the cramped space, and suddenly I realized I was touching him too. He had managed to free himself from his jeans, and the heat of that moment drowned out every anxious thought. Stroking him felt so familiar, yet exciting in a way I never expected. Meanwhile, his hand discovered my own intimate area, and I had long since abandoned using breast forms, so he was encountering the real me. My mind spun with conflicting ideas of desire versus logic, but in the end, it felt completely natural to give him pleasure. His body tensed, and he released in my hand. I straightened my clothes, smiling, more certain than ever that my identity was female. By the time I got home and retreated to my room, I knew I would never go back to being a man. Without a shred of hesitation, I had reached out to please Lewis, and pleasing him was a delight to me as well. As the semester wore on, my body changed even more. My hips and breasts seemed to blossom overnight, inching into a full B-cup. My skin stayed soft without any special creams. Because my frame was generally the same, Dad never seemed to realize how dramatic these changes were, or if he did, he never let on. Deep down, though, I had fully embraced my new self. Mom noticed, of course. Women pick up on details in a way that men often do not. Eventually, she asked about Lewis, inquiring if I'd gone any further with him than I should have. I lied to her clumsily and said no, though it was pretty obvious she didn't believe me. As the sun filtered through my window, I woke up feeling an unusual lightness. Memories of the life I had been living as Jessie the girl lingered like a vivid dream. But when I opened my eyes, I was shocked to see my bedroom the way it used to be, plain, unadorned, unmistakably masculine. Panic fluttered in my chest as I scanned the room, searching for the wigs, the makeup, the dresses, and found nothing. I stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, and caught sight of myself in the mirror. My heart froze. Gone were the soft curves, the familiar smoothness of my chest, and the image I had come to know as Jessie. Staring back at me was my old self, the boy I used to be. My manhood was visible beneath my pajama bottoms, a stark reminder of the change. It was as if everything had been erased. Hearing Mom call from downstairs, I scrambled to find my slippers and the red robe I used to wear. My reflection felt alien now, but I tried to push the unease aside and made my way downstairs. There they were, my parents standing side by side, their faces set with stern expressions. I stopped in my tracks, unsure if this was another twist in the dream or my reality crushing down around me. "Jessie," Dad began, his voice steady but firm, That stunt you pulled was so incredibly stupid, I can't believe you did it. The judge has given us full control over your punishment, and after some discussion, we've reached a decision. Mom chimed in, her tone softer but equally resolute. You wanted to see girls in their lingerie or even naked, didn't you? Well, we're going to give you that chance. But not in the way you imagined. I blinked, my mouth dry, as they continued. From this moment forward, Dad declared, you'll live out the punishment you dreamed of, only this time, it won't be a dream. It hit me like a freight train. They knew. Everything I thought had been a fantasy was something I had already lived, something I had forgotten or been made to forget. My hands trembled as fragmented memories flooded back. The makeup lessons, the soft brush of skirts against my legs, Harry's kiss, Lewis's touch. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it all. Your mother will help you, Dad said, but until you fully embrace the lesson, you're not leaving this house. I didn't argue. Instead, I turned and walked silently back to my room, my mind spinning. When I reached the sanctuary of my old space, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The mirror on my dresser shimmered, catching my attention. As I looked into it, the reflection began to change. My old features blurred, replaced by the familiar face of Jessie. My heart pounded as I touched my chest, feeling the curve of my breasts reappear. My hands trailed lower, confirming that the transformation was happening again. It wasn't a dream, it was real, and I was caught in some mysterious cycle I couldn't escape. But this time, I didn't resist. I smiled. The life I had lived in the dream, my time as Jessie, was not something I regretted. I had tasted freedom, femininity, and a kind of love I had never known before. If this was my new reality, I was ready to embrace it. I opened the closet, where my old clothes hung alongside the dresses and skirts I had worn as Jessie. I chose a simple dress, paired it with a soft cardigan, and brushed out the wig that felt like a crown atop my head. When I looked in the mirror again, Jessie stared back, confident and poised. As I descended the stairs once more, Mom smiled knowingly, her arms crossed. Dad looked away, but I caught the flicker of acceptance in his eyes. This wasn't punishment anymore. This was my life, my second chance. And I intended to make it mine fully, no matter where it led.